Often a claim that we hear is that anti-Zionism is simply criticism of the state of Israel. And we have to ask ourselves, is anti-Zionism the same as being anti-Semitic? This is a great question. It's one that we actually need to dig into a lot. When most people speak of Zionism, let's just first understand what we mean when we say Zionism. This is primarily referring to political Zionism. This is what people mean when they use that term. And this is referring to the political liberation movement of the Jewish people that supports Jewish self-determination in their ancient homeland, the land of Israel. That's primarily broad. There's many definitions of Zionism. That's a broad understanding there. This has always been with the Jewish people. Ever since they've been dispersed in the dispersion, as they call it, they've always had this longing to return back to Zion. However, we need to dig a little deeper than this because we need to examine things from the Bible, not only from the political and secular world. When we read the Bible, we see that when the Jewish people were in exile and when they were dispersed, they still exhibited this longing for Zion. You remember Psalm 137 that speaks, written by the Israelites when they're in captivity in Babylon. It says, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget her skill, and may my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, and if I do not exalt Jerusalem as my chief joy." So throughout the Bible, we do actually see this idea of the Jewish people longing for Zion is quite frequent. Isaiah 62 verse 1, for Zion's sake I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not keep quiet. We find multiple passages that give us this sort of understanding. It's a biblical motivation too. Although many people I understand today don't have that biblical motivation, I've just laid that out so that we have a correct understanding. In the current dialogue that's going on today, when people use the term Zionism, they're referring to Herzlian Zionism. This is the Zionism that was started by Theodor Herzl in the back end of the 19th century. He was a Jewish person, and he was so shocked by the anti-Semitism that he saw, in particularly the Dreyfus affair, that he started to formulate an understanding that the Jews had to return to their ancient homeland as the only way to escape anti-Semitism amongst the diaspora. And he wrote the Jewish State, and he went on to found the World Zionist Organization and the First World Zionist Congress. This is what they're referring to, and obviously the fruition of the Zionist movement led to the establishment of the State of Israel. So when people are saying we're anti-Zionist, what they're meaning is that they are actually in opposition to the modern state of Israel. And then we have to think carefully about what they do mean by that, because this is not the same as just criticizing Israel. You can be someone who fully believes in the right to Jewish self-determination in the land and criticize the policies of Israel. That happens within Israel all the time. That's a good and healthy thing for any democratic nation. However, to say you're anti-Zionist is to actually say a little bit more than that. Yes, it means you're against the policies of Israel, but it actually, when you dig into what it actually means you're against the state of Israel too, in the sense that you don't believe the Jewish people should have right to self-determination in their ancient homeland. So it's an actual repudiation of all the claims of Zionism. So then we have to go a step further and look at this question and ask, is anti-Zionism the same thing as anti-Semitism? Now, technically, maybe if we're just looking at the etymology or the semantics, no, it's not exactly the same. You can be against maybe policies of the State of Israel, but as I've said, I believe it goes a little deeper than that. When you dig in to the origins of the usage of the term anti-Zionism, you'll find that it became extremely popular in public discourse in the post-war period, particularly in the Soviet states. Historian Paul Johnson identifies that the term anti-Zionism was conducted as a code name for anti-Semitism. And this is how the Russians used it, and they pushed out propaganda. Anti-Zionism was really just being used in practice for the Jews. So if it's being anti-Jewish, then that would fall under the banner of anti-Semitism. So we need to have a little think about anti-Semitism. We've seen, if you study history, you'll see anti-Semitism is like a virus, like this ever-mutating thing that changes with every culture and pops its head up in different ways and in different forms. The ex-chief rabbi, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, he made a lovely quotation. I'll read it to you. He said, "In the Middle Ages, Jews were hated because of their religion. In the 19th and 20th century, they were hated because of their race. And today they are hated because of their nation state, Israel. Anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. He was very definitive about that, and I believe there's multiple lines of evidence that would show he was correct about that. One of which being we've seen in the last 3 years, since the conflict post-October 7th has flared up in Israel, what have we seen across the world? It doesn't stay localized to Israel. Like most geopolitical conflicts are confined to the areas of which the war is being conducted. What we've seen is that Jewish people all over the world have suddenly become targets for protesters, for violent assaults, for anti-Jewish graffiti. We've seen riots on university campuses, Jewish academics being barred, Jewish professors being harassed. We've seen Jewish businesses being vandalized and attacked. Many of these people are not Israeli citizens. Many of them are Jewish people that have never set foot in Israel, you see, but they're still being persecuted because of it. And this shows us that often anti-Zionism does lead into anti-Semitism when things like this happen. And that is just one clear example when these two lines are being blurred. Now, many would vigorously protest this, I am aware of that, and they would say, no, it's simply about disagreeing with Zionism, the state of Israel, and the policies of Israel towards the Palestinians, and so on and so forth. How do we distinguish between these two things? It's not simple. It's very complex. There are many levels of complexity we need to understand. The former minister Natan Sharansky, he laid out the criteria for distinguishing when anti-Zionism does in fact cross the line into anti-Semitism. And he called this the 3D test. And it actually stands as a very good way to establish whether anti-Zionism is being anti-Semitic. The 3 Ds are, firstly, demonization, the demonization of Israel. If you're seeing people claiming to be anti-Zionist, but they are in fact demonizing the entire nation and the people of that nation, then he's saying this is anti-Semitism. And we see this with these blood libels where we talk about all Israelis wanting to kill innocent children, the genocide claims saying that they want to wipe out an entire people group, the correlation, often you'll see now that the nation of Israel, they call them the Nazis now, grotesque slur against the nation there. But these are all things that help to demonize the nation of Israel. That is the first D. The second is double standards. So you have demonization and then you have double standards. This is the second test for when anti-Zionism becomes anti-Semitism. And what we mean by this is that are people who are making this accusation applying the same standard to other nations across the world? Or are they holding Israel to a much higher standard than they do the other nations? And I think it's abundantly clear, particularly as you study what has been going on in the Israel-Hamas war. They always mention civilian casualties that have been caused by one side. They never highlight the fact that civilian casualties are actually being promoted on the other side. They never highlight the fact that Hamas is operating from civilian areas. There's just a long list of things that could be presented that are not being presented. And this is indicative of what we call double standards. So we see both delegitimization or demonization, and then we see double standards. And the final one is delegitimization. And what they actually mean by that is they're trying to do things that delegitimize the entire state of Israel. The terminology that is often applied as occupiers or as genocide people, this is all delegitimization. They want to make it so hard for Israel to actually present itself as a viable state. They do everything they can, the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement to try and destroy the state from within. All of these play into this category. So these three things are what Sharansky labeled as ways you can identify when anti-Zionism has gone into anti-Semitism. And I think in the theological world, if you read in the supersessionist literature, many of the views of Christians who hold to the view that Israel is just a creation of the Zionist entity, they don't have any future purpose for Israel, what you'll find is that you don't have to read too far before you do find demonization, double standards, and delegitimizations in their writings. You'll often find accusations of genocide and apartheid. Israel is some immoral colonizer that is seeking to persecute people unjustly. You'll find all of these claims. And therefore, I believe in the Christian world, if we're being dragged into anti-Semitic discourse in our theological arguments, that's a very worrying state of affairs. Why it's so important that the church is actually addressing, identifying, and exposing these things.